guys, and welcome back to my channel. So it's been a little while since I've done sewing content, and I really would like to try and incorporate more. I do want to try out some different formats, but one of the things that I have really struggled with, especially in living in an apartment that's not very large, and I think it's something that I addressed in my sewing vlog, is pattern storage. So organizing patterns, especially indie patterns that don't come in an envelope. So the vast majority of the patterns that I have are ones that I have purchased or found online, because there are a lot of free patterns out there, which is a great resource. So a lot of the patterns that I use are indie patterns from online that I have to print at home. And I really have struggled with how to organize my patterns in a way that makes sense, that doesn't take up a ton of space, that makes them easily accessible, that makes it so that I can actually find what I'm looking for and all of that. And so I recently kind of did a little bit of brainstorming about that, and I finally got a system that I think is going to work for the most part. It's definitely not perfect, and I will potentially change it again in the future if it becomes necessary, but I think that overall this is going to be probably the best way that I have for storing patterns in a small apartment. So I will say at some point I do need to clear out one of the boxes over here so that I can store some patterns in there, because I'm outgrowing my current pattern storage situation, but for now I at least have enough room, for the patterns I've got right now. So one of the first considerations for pattern storage, especially if you are buying patterns online or if you're finding free patterns online to download, is where do you store them? How do you store just those initial files? So what I've actually done, and I'm not going to show it on my computer just because I feel like it's going to be pretty self-explanatory. So I have a separate folder that is just labeled sewing, that all of my patterns go in there. So I do have some folders that I like to use. I have found that fairly generic folders that I can dump things in make a lot more sense than being really, really specific. So what I mean by that is I have a separate folder that is potential makes. So those are going to be all the patterns that I have purchased that I haven't yet printed out and or that I haven't yet made. So within my potential makes, I actually use the same folder organization system that I do for all the patterns that I've actually printed out. So that I actually have two, I've this set up twice, just so that it's easy to find my potential makes and it's easy to find the ones that I've actually already printed out. So my actual pattern organization system is basically I do tops, bottoms, combinations, and dresses. So like rompers, jumpsuits, and dresses, but I use the French word because I can do combi, and that's actually just shorter for the file name, or the folder name rather. I do outerwear, undergarments, loungewear. I think loungewear and PJs are together. I do home, and I think that's actually it. I think I have hacks as well. So I try to keep a fairly small number of folders. And so for example, outerwear is going to be anything from coats to cardigans. Anything that is not a t-shirt in and of itself is going to fall into that category. Bottoms is going to be anything from shorts, culottes, jeans, trousers, skirts, anything that is just a bottom and below is going to go into that folder. When I have a pattern that I specifically bought for one of the categories, but it has multiple variations. So the one I'm thinking of in particular is the Demeter dress. So it's actually labeled, if I remember, it's the Anna Allen Demeter dress, but it has variations where you can do a tank top and a short sleeve top. So I actually keep that in dresses. Although I do actually do the tank top and the short sleeve dress, I've made both of those, but I file it under dresses, and I don't have so many patterns that I forget, so I know that that's also a top pattern. On the other hand, I do the all well box top. That falls under tops, even though you can hack it to make a dress. So when it's something that falls kind of like that, it sort of depends. For example, my Pipit loungewear set, that actually goes into loungewear, even though I use the shorts pattern a ton just for regular wearing around the house, but also shorts to go outside. But because the pattern itself comes as a set, I've put that into loungewear. It's also in the name, so I'm going to remember where it is. So that's kind of my digital organization, but that doesn't really help you when you need to actually make and cut out fabric and make your patterns. So the way that I've kind of figured out is I've always had an envelope system, and I actually have some of my old envelopes over here because the ones that were in the best quality I actually saved when I moved from the system. So for example, imagine that, Anna Allen Demeter dress. So this is one that I did just a very simple setup. This was actually a fairly early pattern that I bought, and so that's why it's just kind of like this. As I've made more and more patterns and I've gotten more and more experienced, I did start to add more information onto the envelope, and those envelopes often were ones that I ended up throwing away, although I do have an example here I can show you. This doesn't have a lot of information, but it does have some. So this is the Darren Doe Sirocco jumpsuit, and I've written down on the bottom here that I've printed sizes 42 to 46, and that it's a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So as you can see, like as I kind of got more experienced, I add more information onto the envelope. So I find it really helpful to write down, if it's something with layers, which layers did I actually print? If it's something that's all sizes, which size did I ultimately trace? What's the seam allowance? So those were kind of some initial things that I was putting on my envelopes, but the problem that I ran into is those craft and like manila envelopes, they don't hold up very well, especially with patterns that I have a ton of variations that I make. So one in particular is the Allwell box top. I have patterns prepped in sizes 1, 2, and 3. I've got a dress version, I've got the ruffle version, I've got an adapted ruffle version, I've got a crop top, I've got the regular length, I've got the tie add-on, I've got so many different variations that just the paper that I used to make those pattern pieces, it was a lot of paper. And so that particular folder was starting to rip and it wasn't gonna last for very long. So I did a little bit of searching on Amazon, and I try to stay away from using plastic as much as possible, but in terms of like not wasting a ton of paper and like having something that's actually gonna hold up over time, I did decide to ultimately get some plastic envelopes. So I have a couple left over here, and literally a couple, I think I have like 3. Oops, come on. So these are the little envelopes that I got. I will try and find something similar on Amazon. Obviously I use Amazon France because I live in France, and the catalog is sometimes different with what they have. So these are just little snap envelopes. They're clear so you can see through, and they are not super thick, so they're not really bulky, but they're gonna hold up better than the paper ones. So hopefully, and also I'm trying really hard to not overstuff these like I was doing with the paper patterns, which is one of the reasons why I have so few left. So what I actually did is I went through all of my patterns that I have printed out, and I put them into the, I've got my little ottoman over here, so take off the lid so I can get into patterns. So let's pick a good one here. Literally I'm just picking the Anna Allen dress. Like that's just the one I'm grabbing. So what I did is all of my patterns are now in these little folders, and I try to be consistent. So if I have it landscape, then my button is on the top here. If it is vertical, where do I have a vertical pattern? If it is vertical, then my button is over here, so that when I stand them up, they're always going in the same direction. So this is an example of one where I did it landscape, and what I actually did is for all of my patterns, and this did take a little while, but I feel like it's going to be really helpful in the long run, especially for the patterns that I make the most frequently, is I printed out the general, like, you know, the front of pattern information, like the instruction booklet, basically the first page. So a lot of times it's going to show you all the variations. I also wrote down at the bottom here which sizes I had printed out. So I have size 10, view B and D, plus the split back / crop hack. The next thing I printed out is I printed out the size chart. So this, I've got the size chart and the fabric requirements, so that when I want to make this again, if I'm going to be going to the fabric store, I can just pull out the pattern rather than having to go over to my computer and pull up the instruction packet, because honestly, with some of these patterns, I don't even open the instruction packet anymore. As long as I know how much fabric I need, and as long as I know the seam allowance, I don't really need to look at the instructions for ones that I've made frequently. So with one like this, I know exactly how I make this. I just need to remember what the seam allowance is. So this is one that, silly me, I didn't actually write the seam allowance. I need to go back and fix that. But let's see, one of them that I did, so this one, let's see, I'm gonna pick out an Allwell one because that is one that I've got. So here we go. So this is for my All Well box top. And as you can see, I've actually got multiple folders. So what I did is for the first one, basically whichever one was the base pattern, which for me is the size 3, that's the largest size that I had printed out. Size 3 I count as my base pattern because that's the one that I use without like extra pattern pieces. So all of my base pattern pieces are in this one, and when I went through and I prepped it, oops, for this one and this one only, I actually also printed some more information. So I printed for all of my iterations of the box top, any extra, any separate folder, I have this printed out with some notes written on the bottom. But for only the base pattern, I printed out this. So what I have is, I've got the variations over here, I've got your prep checklist, I've got your measurement chart and sizing, and then on the back, I have the finished garment measurements and the fabric requirements. So this is one that, and actually I remember why. For this one and for the Anna Allen, I didn't write down the seam allowance because I know it's 1/2 inch because I make these patterns so frequently. Just saying. I don't recommend relying on memory. I do recommend actually going back through and writing your seam allowance down. I should do that, but I know for these two patterns, they're probably two of my most made patterns of all time. I tend to just know that that's the seam allowance. So this is my first one, so it's base pattern size 3. Then what I did is I split out my patterns into a couple of different folders so that they would be easier to find. So I have size 2 and I've got little notes. So I've got the bishop sleeve, crop plus tie. So I know I have my base size 2 pattern, but I also have the pattern piece for the bishop sleeve. So for the hack that I did where I did elastic at the wrist, that was for the size 2. And so it makes no sense to put it in with the size 3. I put it in with the size 2. My crop and tie hack, I do based on the size 2 as well. And so I have the original crop pattern, I have the adapted crop pattern that I use when I do the tie front, and I have the tie front pattern pieces. Then I've got my ruffle top. So this is actually a size 2, but because it's the ruffle top, I've actually kept it separate just because I really wanted to kind of reduce the amount of paper in each folder, and since I did end up getting so many folders, I just gave this one its own thing because it's such a specific type, and I don't make it that frequently. Whereas the size 2, I make the size 2, I make the size 2 crop, I make the size 2 crop with the tie, like I make that a lot more frequently. So, and then I also have the size 1, and this one is in the back because it's the only one I haven't made. This is actually gonna be for my mom, and I am, like, it's not usually the size. I tend to like making the size 2 or the size 3 because they're just a little bit more like ease and all of that, and I just like that fit more. But for my mom, she's smaller than I am, so I needed this one for her, and I wanted to have it in its own separate folder because I know that I'm going to be hacking it a little bit. I think that I'm going to ultimately do like a half sleeve with a curved front and back with a slight high-low hem, whereas this is just the long sleeve size 1, like straight size 1 pattern pieces. So I'm gonna ultimately have to make some adaptations, and I wanna keep the base size 1 just in case I make it again. So I wanted to have a separate folder so that when I do the altered versions, the hacked versions of the pattern pieces, I can just throw them in here. Now, you might wonder, didn't you say there was a dress version? Yes, there is, and that is in with dresses. So I'm actually gonna have to organize these again. Let's see, where is my All Well dress? Yes, so I do also have the dress, and it's back with my dresses. So what I have over here is that I've got the dress and I've got the pocket, and it might seem weird that I've put the pocket on there. However, this is the pocket pattern piece that I use for a lot of, like, if I'm going to add a pocket to something, I typically use this pocket pattern piece. So I wanted to make sure that I labeled where it was. So that's kind of the method that I've used for setting up the patterns in the actual envelopes. Is I like to have the information, so all of the different variations. I like to have the size chart. I like to have the fabric requirements. If in those first couple of pages it has a seam allowance, I also print that out. But what I basically did is I tried as much as possible to, so I print multiple pages on one, and I do print on the back. So I can basically get up to 4 pages from the instruction booklet on one piece of paper. And so I tried to limit what I was doing to just one piece of paper in the envelope, but I tried to pick the most useful information that I'm going to need to have when I want to make this pattern again. So that's kind of the first step. The second step is, how do I organize them in my box? So let's see if I can do this. Oh my gosh. gosh. So here's my little poof. And as you can see, I've got just like this solid box. So what I've done, oh my gosh, is I have actually put a printer box in the bottom. I think I showed you guys this in the sewing vlog. I honestly don't remember. But this actually has been working pretty well. I am running out of space. I sew a lot. So what I've actually done is over to one side, not inside the box, I actually have all of my bag patterns. So I've got like my Costa tote, I've got my Numi, I've got all of my Allwells, so the Half Moon bag, the bucket bag, and the Weekender. And what I actually did with the bucket bag is, because those pieces, they're so small, I just put the Half Moon zip set up at the top. So those pattern pieces are also in here. So I figured, you know, I will have all of my clothes kind of organized in a line, and then these are just off to the side so that I can very easily find my bags. So what I do after that is I basically start and I do similar configurations to my to the folders in my digital system. So I start with tops, and I typically will start with tank tops, going back to long sleeve tops. Then I do my dresses, so, you know, short sleeve tank dresses and shorter dresses down to my longer long sleeve dresses. Then I do my jumpsuits, so again, you know, short sleeve to long sleeve, and insofar as that applies to the pattern. Otherwise, I kind of just arbitrarily put them. A lot of times I put the ones that I make the most up at the front because those are the ones I reach for first. After jumpsuits, then I do bottoms, and then at the back I have loungewear and PJs. And so that is just because those are the categories I use in my digital system, and because that's kind of the order I think of things in, I know roughly where in the box to find those individual patterns. And then I actually do have a section that is up in the front. So these are all the ones that are not inside that printer box that I don't really have room in the printer box for them, but these are the patterns that I've either not fully made and I'm working on, or that I haven't actually set up. So for example, I've got my Truly Victorian combinations pattern, and I even have the muslin of the bodice in here so that I don't lose track of it. I've got the Untitled Thoughts Amelie dress. So this is one that I've actually already done the prep work for, but I haven't, I've put the pattern, the general pattern together, and I've cut out the individual pattern pieces, but it's all sizes. And so what I need to do is trace my size. But because I haven't gotten to that, this one goes up front, not in with my dresses. I have my Sirocco jumpsuit, and this one I actually have left the sticky note that I had on my folder initially, and when I deal with this, I'll get rid of that. But I've written down at the bottom here, so I've got the sizes I've printed out, and I've got the seam allowance, but this is one I haven't even put together. These are just the printer pages, so I actually have to go through and tape them all together. I've got the Shelby Romper. This is another version. So I went up a size, and it's the long version, and so I haven't actually put that together. I've got ditto for the Dion Duster. I've got the pencil skirt from Patterns for Pirates. It's actually all cut out. I just haven't made it yet. And I've also got the Juliet jumpsuit. So these are ones that, for the most part, it's patterns that I haven't actually finished to a point that it's ready for me to actually cut fabric out. And then I have other ones that I haven't made yet that I'm I don't know, we'll see if I ultimately get to it, but I don't want to put it in my filed system, because typically stuff that's filed is for patterns that I've actually made, and they're things that I have my size, I've made them before, I've got some notes on it and all of that. These are the ones that I want to make that I haven't gotten to yet. So, oops, there we go. I do also have a few paper patterns, and they are just kind of squished into the side. I have a couple paper patterns that actually aren't even my size. They're ones that I brought back from my mom that she got when I was 16, and they don't really fit anymore. But I don't want to get rid of them, so I think what I'll do is maybe see if I can go to a fabric store and see if anybody would want them, see if there are any friends who sew who would be interested in them, or what have you. But I'm just holding on to them in with all of my patterns so that I don't lose them, but they're not really ones that I'm necessarily going to make. So that is my pattern organization. As I mentioned, I would love at some point to have one of my squares on my bookshelf free and do some more patterns. At that point, I might look into getting magazine organizers so I can pull out and just have tops, bottoms, dresses. And I think what I would do is I would probably pick my most made sections and then leave the stuff that I don't make as frequently in my ottoman, because it's still a really great storage space. It's just that I'm running out of room. So if you guys have any comments or questions on organizing and storing your patterns, let me know. I've seen some really good ways of like organizing them digitally and all of that. And I think I'm definitely more on kind of like the low key side. Like I don't tag everything in my folders. I just kind of dump them into folders and deal with it like that, because I like periodically going through all of my folders and reminding myself of the patterns that I have. And so I don't want to have something that's like too overly organized, because I just wouldn't end up then looking at the things. I don't know. I don't know why. This is just the system that I've come up with, and it's been working really well so far. It is definitely a little bit unwieldy the more patterns that I get and the more patterns that I make, but it's been working, you know what I mean? So if you're looking for a way that you don't have to like hang up your patterns, because like I would love to be able to hang up my patterns and not have them all folded up, I just don't have the space for that. So if you're looking for something to like kind of save space, I found that this system works really well, and I still have all the information I need without it, you know, taking up an entire bookshelf, even though I would not be mad about having a bookshelf dedicated entirely to patterns. Might be a bit excessive though, you know. So yeah, that is all I have for you guys today. If you guys have any comments or questions, let me know down below, and I will see you in my next video. Bye. Hey guys, so if you've made it all the way to the end of this video and are actually watching my end screen and you're not subscribed to my channel, I would really appreciate it if you would. There's a little button right there for you to do it. And if you're interested in watching some more of my videos, I have links to 2 of my older videos off to the left there, so you can check those out if you would like to, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.